Hi there. Welcome to Children's Wisconsin's ongoing live Q&A series. My name is Dustin, and I'll be leading a discussion today about mental and behavior health and the importance of focusing on it during another unconventional back-to-school season. As you may know, Children's Wisconsin launched our Shine Through campaign last year as part of our effort to bring awareness to and address the mental and behavior health challenges of kids in Wisconsin. You can learn more at it by visiting the website on the screen, shinethrough.childrenswi.org. Today I'm joined with two members of our team here at Children's Wisconsin who have a great deal of expertise and passion in the mental and behavioral health space. Joining me are Dr. Jenny Walzack, Clinical Director of Mental and Behavioral Health here at Children's Wisconsin, and Morgan Burch, LCSW, Child and Family Therapist, Behavioral Health in Schools. We'll be taking a particular focus on mental and behavioral health as it relates to kids heading back to school in the coming weeks, along with a broader view of the issues Wisconsin kids are struggling with today. Now, back to school means a lot of things for a lot of different people, and we understand that that's changing by the day. So our intent in this conversation is to focus on kids' mental and behavioral health in a way that is relevant to whatever their individual back-to-school situation is. Back on August 9th, we did another Facebook and YouTube Live specifically regarding back-to-school safety around COVID-19. You can find that on both our Facebook page or our YouTube channel. We also invite you to ask your own questions in the comments today. For those that are commenting while we're live, we'll do our best to answer your questions towards the end of this broadcast. And if you missed it live, we'll still be answering questions as they are left in the comments. Dr. Walczak and Morgan, thank you both again for joining us today. I'd like to start by having you both introduce yourselves and describe a little more about what your roles are specifically on the children's team. Jenny, let's go with you.
Sure. Thanks for having us, Dustin. I'm Jenny Walzack. I'm the Clinical Director of Mental and Behavioral Health. I'm also the Director over our Psychiatry and Early Childhood Mental Health Programming. Part of my role at Children's Wisconsin is to really help with our universal screening initiative, as well as many other initiatives. We are trying to screen every child for mental and behavioral health concerns that walk through our door. Big project, many years ahead of us, but we are dedicated to identifying concerns earlier and getting kiddos into treatment so they have better outcomes as adults.
You're up, Morgan.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I'm Morgan Birch, and I'm a child and family therapist within the Madison location here at Children's Wisconsin. I work within a school-based mental health program in partnership with the Madison Metropolitan School District. So part of my role is providing child and family therapy services to those students.
Okay, thank you so much. So Morgan, can you talk specifically about what exactly mental and behavioral health means as it relates to Wisconsin's kids and why it's such an important issue today?
Yeah, of course. Well, mental and behavioral health include our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. In childhood, this means reaching developmental and emotional milestones, in addition to learning essential social skills and how to cope in a healthy way when there are challenges. It's important to acknowledge that mental and physical health are equally important components of our overall health.
So something I'm sure a lot of people have heard, I've heard it, is that there's a mental and behavioral health crisis for kids in Wisconsin right now. But what exactly do we mean by that when we say a crisis?
Well, we've seen an increase in anxiety and depression since the start of the pandemic. And prior to the pandemic, the rates of childhood anxiety and depression were already on the rise. Nationally, 1 in 6 children between the ages of 6 and 17 has a treatable mental health disorder such as depression, anxiety, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Really driving this mental health crisis is an increasingly competitive academic environment, the rise of social media, which is also allowing for greater access to information in general. And this can often set unrealistic expectations for our children. Additionally, we do not have the amount of mental health providers needed to meet the growing demand for mental health services in Wisconsin and across the nation. Parents and caregivers seeking treatment are often met with long wait times and financial barriers.
So we certainly know that the mental and behavioral health of our kids is a persistent and ongoing issue before COVID, during COVID, and I'm sure it will be after COVID that needs our attention. In our current world, though, with the global pandemic and the reality of school starting up very shortly, there's more added stress than ever before, specifically around back to school. Jenny, what are some of your concerns around back to school today?
Yeah, Dustin, I think, and part of, before I dive in, I think part of what you point out too is this roller coaster that we've been on. And I think even, recently we were thinking, gosh, things are looking really good, masks are going away. And then with the introduction of the Delta variant, it's added another kind of loop on that roller coaster. So, in addition to some of those stats that Morgan pointed out, we're also seeing, as many of us know, parents are under really significant stress during the pandemic. So as we approach kind of back to school, it's another loop on that roller coaster. It's been a really hard year and a half for many. Schooling has looked really different. So it's hard to kind of speak broadly to what kids are going through during this transition, because some kids have been able to get back to school. Some have been virtual since the start of the pandemic, and this may be that the first time that they're walking back into the school building since March of 2020. So it's really going to be, I think, kind of a hard transition for others, for some kids, and an easier transition for others. I think too, parents that have are probably going to have some concerns about children's learning. So some of the data that has come out has shown that, due to the pandemic and kind of this upheaval of traditional schooling, we have kiddos that are behind. And what the data is showing is that kiddos are really behind in math, behind in reading. And so parents are definitely it's another layer of stress around how their kiddo is going to do academically when they go back to school. Kiddos too, who may have an IEP or receive some special education services, there may have been a lapse in those services during the pandemic or while they were at home. And so I think we're going to also see a lot of catch up during, this first part of the school of really like kids and educators just, I think, getting reacquainted, seeing where kids' learning is at, and, where the gaps are and how we can address those. So I think we are hopeful that the school year is starting, but I think also parents, give yourself grace. Kiddos, give yourself grace, because it is going to be a big transition for many.
Morgan, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think I echo a lot of what Jenny said, and I would add that right now, talking to your child about going back to school is incredibly important as you prepare for the new school year, in order to really just check in with them and see how they're feeling about this return. As children and adolescents transition back into school, parents and caregivers may observe symptoms such as like possible separation anxiety in younger children, increased behavioral challenges. For older children, parents and caregivers may see symptoms of anxiety, increased behavioral challenges, and or mood concerns or changes. So just like Dr. Walzack said, having grace for yourself and for your children, but also just keeping mental and behavioral health at the forefront as they're transitioning back, and knowing it will take some time.
So that's a great segue to my next question. So you both kind of touched on it. The stress of the pandemic obviously isn't limited to kids. We felt it. People watching this have felt it. So from conflict over masking, social distancing, vaccinations, we know that there's a lot of stressful conversations happening between adults about kids right now. How can parents work to cast a positive shadow for their kids when it comes to dealing with stress as it relates to the pandemic, but in general specifically?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that parents should, I think we're all out buying school supplies right now. Do we have the right folder? Do we have the crayons, the right scissor? I think one of the things that should be at the top of parents' checklist is, first off, like checking and seeing where their kid is at. So like I said, we have a spectrum here. We have some kids who are really excited. They want to go back to school. Some who may be more anxious or tentative. So first off, like see where your kid is at with that transition back to school. Morgan's going to talk in a little while, or we're going to talk in a little while about how to have that conversation with your kiddo. But I think that's kind of the first piece is parents gauging kind of where their kid's stress level is at and how they're feeling. I think from there, parents really are role models for their children. So the children are going to look up to their parents for how they react, how they handle situations, as a guide for how, what they should do. So I always encourage parents in an age appropriate way to share their own thoughts and feelings. And this is where, again, checking in with your kiddo about kind of where they're at with returning to school and where their stress level is at even around the pandemic and, so masking, and they may have even heard, depending on their age, about vaccinations. Checking in with them about where they're at, and then sharing a little bit too of your own feelings and how you cope with those feelings. That's the other important piece, because kiddos, that's great to share, but then kiddos are going to be looking for, well, okay, great, now what do I do with this? And so it's really sharing some of those ways that you cope, problem solving together too. So not necessarily giving your kiddo the solution for if they're feeling stressed, kind of how to deal with it, but can you problem solve together around it? So I think those are just like a couple ways that we remember that, adults really cast that positive shadow for those kiddos and can help them with some positive steps for problem solving and just managing stress.
So Morgan, what is the best way to start that conversation with kids around their mental and behavioral health?
Yeah, I think parents and caregivers sometimes don't know how to begin talking to children about their mental and behavioral health, or may not always feel comfortable in doing so. So a few things that can be helpful in navigating this conversation are really just encouraging an open communication by checking in with your child, even when it seems like there's nothing truly wrong. Trying to make these conversations part of your regular routine will really help your child to normalize sharing and talking about feelings. It's really beneficial to validate your child's feelings, and they'll gain that trust with you to be able to be more open in conversations in the future. And as Jenny said, parents and caregivers are role models for their children. You truly know your child best, and you know what is like the best approach to have in talking with your child about where they're at, what they need support with. And if your child expresses a problem or a challenge that they're having, instead of offering how to fix the problem, like Jenny said, again, try to problem solve with them so that they can have some ownership over the solution. And this really allows them to strengthen some of their social emotional skills that will be beneficial in the long term.
So we've alluded to this a bit in our conversation today, but I want to ask the question bluntly and directly because I think it's an important thing to establish. But mental and behavioral health affects kids of all ages, right?
Certainly, yes. Kids at different ages, they may deal with things differently and face different challenges, of course, but it's important to talk to all of our kids about mental and behavioral health. Parents and caregivers should really just watch for changes in their child's behaviors or mood that are sustained and impacting their functioning across environments. And what I mean by that is whether it's in their home, at school, or within the community, this is truly how parents and caregivers can start to kind of recognize if there is a need for concern and how to better support their child's overall mental and behavioral health.
And just to piggyback off of that too, I think it's important to have these conversations regularly, not just when you think there's a problem. So really making sure that we're talking about mental health, talking about feelings as a part of our normal conversation with kiddos, not just waiting for maybe a problem to crop up. That just, again, it goes more to that normalizing and destigmatizing talking about mental and behavioral health. We have launched some resources on our Shine Through website. And that website it's amazing, offers lots of tips for parents based on children's ages and different concerns that parents may be struggling with. And you'll see on the screen we have shinethrough.childrenswi.org/parents. Some of the topics that you'll see on there are, again, more about this, having this conversation around kiddos' feelings, concerns to watch for, symptoms, how to set expectations and boundaries, and just a variety of other topics, some also broken down by age. So if you have a toddler or teen, you can really hone in on the topics around that age group. So I highly recommend visiting the For Parents section of the Shine Through website to learn more. And I also want to add, just going back, like Dustin said, does mental and behavioral health affect kids of all ages? Absolutely too. When we at Children's Wisconsin, we offer programming in early childhood mental health, which really focuses on our youngest 0 to 5 population. Some of those providers in our early childhood mental health program are certified in infant mental health. That's a really strange concept, I think, for some to think about, like my infant mental health. But part of that is really focused on understanding that, how to bond and how to attach and how to foster healthy mental and behavioral health with your baby, and how to set them on kind of that right course for, again, like raising healthy little people and then healthy adults.
And I think that's interesting to think about and take that term of mental health as a topic that isn't necessarily just when there's an issue or a problem, but can be part of building a healthy lifestyle for your child and helping your child develop in the healthiest, best way possible. So how can a parent know if their child is going through typical mood changes or if it's something more serious? Can you both kind of give some tips of some signs that parents might be able to look for in their child to know that, maybe they need to work a little more harder or seek some professional help? What signs are there in kids?
Yes, of course. For young children, parents and caregivers should watch for an increased sensitivity, irritability, clinginess, maybe more nightmares, inattentional and behavioral regressions. For example, a child who was previously potty trained may start to having accidents again, or we might see that a young child may start to regress backwards with their language and vocabulary and using what maybe some people may refer to as baby talk and not kind of speaking or engaging in a way that's age appropriate for them. So those are definitely some things to watch out for in our young children.
And for older kiddos, families are, many I think are going to be more familiar with some of the signs and symptoms that would be concerning. A parent may notice things like sadness, anxiety, irritability. Kiddo is more withdrawn, changes in their eating or sleeping, eating much more than they typically do, or not wanting to eat at all, as well as sleep, wanting to sleep all the time or really having a hard time with sleep. So, for example, we may see a teen, we may want to seek help for a teen if, all of a sudden they really seem sad all the time, they stop showering, they stop talking to friends, and they're suddenly not eating. So some of the key pieces here too, like are symptoms, but also are they sustained? So, everyone is sad, everyone gets anxious, but it's that these symptoms are pervasive and happening for quite some time, and not seeming to get better. And then functioning, that's the other piece. So we're sad all the time, we're anxious all the time, and then it's impacting our ability to do the things that we normally do. So like I said, we have a typical teen who enjoys socializing with their friends and going out. And all of a sudden, that teen is in their room, they don't want to talk to anyone, and they stop showering, kind of all those things. So their functioning is really impacted. And Morgan spoke earlier too about like different settings. So this is where we may see, the kiddo all of a sudden is not doing well at school anymore. Their grades have dropped and they seem moody at home. So it's really not just, gosh, they seem sad, I should call a mental health professional. But it's they seem sad, and there's some of these other pieces going on too, where it's sustained and their functioning is really impacted.
So we've often told parents to talk to your child's teacher. And I think a lot of parents are probably wondering when they hear that, like, what do I tell my child's teacher? What information is helpful for a teacher, or what information isn't helpful for a teacher?
So I think teachers and other individuals at the school can be a great partner with parents. Teachers spend a significant amount of time with your child, and they can often be helpful in talking through concerns that you may have. So maybe you're seeing something at home, like in the examples I just gave, bringing that to a teacher and saying, gosh, he's really not talking to his friends anymore, and I'm noticing these things. And seeing if the teacher is seeing any of those concerns as well at school, because that's going to speak to those concerns really being present in two major areas of that kiddo's life. Teachers are also, and this was part of the challenge with the pandemic, is teachers can also be a frontline in bringing concerns that they have about the kiddo to parents. And that was one of those things with the pandemic when everyone was home. There was concern that maybe we were missing some kids who were having mental and behavioral health concerns, or who maybe needed special education services due to their learning. And so parents can be really or teachers can be really helpful with bringing concerns to parents if they suspect something's off or something has changed, or if they think that the kiddo may be having a mental or behavioral health concern. So when parents talk to teachers, maybe bringing their own concerns, asking the child's teacher about changes that they notice at school. Gosh, is he spending time with his friends still? Or if you noticed any changes with his learning, is he being bullied? Is he completing his work? Another thing too is really looking at, and the structure is going to be different depending on your school district and what school you go to, but talking to the student services team, which may be made up of a psychologist, a school-based mental health professional, and different professions. And they can often help with supporting you and figuring out kind of what's going on at school, or if your child is having a concern. And then too, I think it's important to point out, parents always, or a caregiver always has the right to a meeting, and to ask for a meeting, to ask questions, to review concerns, to go through the report card. You always have that right as a parent. So don't be shy to also say, I really want to have a meeting to talk about this.
So I'm going to put you on the spot with a question that came through that I would normally wait till the end of this, but I think it ties into this topic really, really well. One of our viewers kind of asked for tips on preparing a kid that really needs and grows with connections to their teachers. Do you have any tips about how a parent can prep or encourage their child to connect with their teacher on their first day as they head back to school, especially for kids that might be transitioning back to in-person school after an extended period of time doing remote learning?
That's a great question. I can go first, Morgan. The first thing that kind of comes to mind for me is maybe if you are able to access that teacher even that morning, or get an email out to them or a phone call before that kiddo hits the door that morning, and letting them know that that's really important to your child and that's their way to connect. I think that's going to help that teacher tremendously, and she's going to really appreciate that information. That's kind of one. It's just if we can put that out in the world to the teacher so she's aware and can maybe make a special point to connect with your child. The other thing, if that's not possible, or even if that is, maybe having the child, working with your child to prep them on, what is something that they could share with the teacher? How could they approach the teacher? Something special they did over the summer, or something that they really enjoy doing, or what do they love about school, so that you're really coaching your child to have that interaction and that touch point with the teacher. Those were kind of two that came to mind. Morgan, can you think of anything else?
Yeah, I have to say, yeah, Jenny, I completely agree with you. That was also coming to my mind as I work with a lot of children around building relationships. And so we do a little bit of coaching and practicing and just preparation before having those conversations about relationship building. So it might help to initially have that conversation with your child about, like, what do you want your teacher to know? What is important for you to share with others? Whether it is a fun fact or something you did this summer. And them having that kind of in the back of their mind will help to build that confidence and make them feel more comfortable in having those conversations with their teachers or other students. I think especially after this pandemic, from what I've seen working within schools, a lot of staff and teachers are really focused on relationship building because we recognize how important relationships are, especially after the isolation we've had with this pandemic, and how we need to take time to foster those relationships and have time for students to reconnect and teachers to connect with students. So my hope is that a lot of districts are focusing on those initial weeks of helping really build the curriculum or really build practice around that relationship building and getting to know the students firsthand, and then diving into a couple of the other pieces that we know come with school.
And just to, Dustin, working off of Morgan, if you have a kiddo who's a little anxious to approach, or that, you know, that may be a little anxiety provoking for them, but this connection is really important, have them draw a picture to bring to the teacher. If the child is able to write, maybe they can write some of those things that Morgan spoke to down, or you could help them compose a little letter that they bring into their teacher of things that they, you know, they want the teacher to know about them. So just trying to take into account all of the different scenarios in our head.
Yeah, those are great. Thank you for taking that right now. It just seemed like such a natural connection here. So on the topic of still, you know, in the classroom connections, Morgan, I'm hoping you can speak a little bit to what exactly a school-based mental health therapist does, and how they can support students and parents, and how families can get access to a school-based mental health therapist.
Of course. As a school-based mental health therapist, I'm lucky enough to have my office located within the school, so I can provide therapeutic services to students during the school day. This oftentimes allows for the elimination of barriers that may arise while leaving school for an appointment, such as transportation or time away from academic learning. And through the school-based mental health program, the ability for me to truly immerse into the school community and the culture has allowed me greater opportunities to collaborate with school staff in order to better support the needs of students and their families. Typically, families can access our services through a referral process, which is determined by each school-based mental health program and school team. To kind of go back to a piece that Jenny had said earlier, that student services team is really key in connecting with at your school, if that is a service offered at your school, because they do know a lot about maybe some of your child's needs and how to best access those community resources or support services such as the school-based mental health program.
Great. So with our focus on children's mental and behavioral health, I'm hoping one or both of you can talk about some of the resources across the spectrum that are available to parents.
Yeah, I'm happy to start off with that question. And at first, I think it can be incredibly beneficial for parents and caregivers to start that conversation with their child's pediatrician, especially if they've developed a trusting relationship throughout the years of their child's care. The pediatrician can better assess the concerns that are raised and potentially provide referrals to community resources. If a child is having a mental health emergency, though, such as experiencing suicidal thoughts or self-harm, we recommend that parents and caregivers take the child to the nearest emergency room or contact 911. And additionally, there are a variety of resources on the Shine Through website, which Jenny had mentioned earlier. And there are so many other resources too that either your pediatrician, the school staff, or even us here at Children's can provide in regards to mental health support lines, emergency lines, anything that could be really resourceful throughout the times of need.
And Dustin, I just want to add to, like Morgan was mentioning about suicide. We often, you know, as mental health professionals get asked a lot about how to talk about suicide. That is a really hard topic. One of the things I want to point out is that asking your child directly or having a conversation about suicide will not increase their risk around committing or attempting suicide. So I want to put that out there, because we give a lot of conversation points, and I think this is a super hard conversation for parents to have, but nonetheless important. And so saying the word, talking about it is not, the literature supports that is not going to increase their risk. I love to shout out our parents, right? This is, parents are right there, part of the equation with kiddos. And so parents, it is also super important for you to acknowledge your own mental health right now. I talked about the roller coaster earlier. You have been right on that roller coaster ride with your kiddo through the pandemic. Parental stress is higher since the pandemic. So it's not surprising that many parents may be having more mental health concerns. So there are resources for parents as well. Similar to kiddos, the number one place that we recommend you start if you're thinking that you are having some mental health concerns is to speak with your healthcare provider if you have one. If you don't have one, take a look if you have insurance on the back of your card and give your insurance company a call and ask for providers that are within network or in your area. There are also ample resources online. There are a number of companies right now offering telehealth, where you can connect with a provider virtually and do some counseling that way. So lots of things out there, starting with primary care, calling your insurance company if you have insurance, and otherwise going on the internet and searching for counseling in your area are all good places to start.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you both so much. We have one audience question that we're going to jump to in a second. But before we do, I want to ask a very practical and specific question as it relates back to COVID-19 issues and in school. Earlier in this broadcast, I had mentioned that we did a different Facebook and YouTube live stream back on August 9th around actual safety precautions in schooling as it relates to COVID-19. And we were asked by a lot of parents about how they should handle it if they're having their child wear a mask, even if it isn't required in their school. They're worried their kids might be bullied for taking additional precautions versus not. Do either of you have any thoughts about how parents can talk through that reality with their kids?
Yeah, so I think this is a great question. I think that, like other things kids are bullied about, I would have parents think about how would they recommend their child handle other situations with bullying. And it's hard to give kind of a broad brushstroke there, Dustin, of like, you should do this, right? Because we have parents kind of would say all different things depending on their values and beliefs. And so I think it goes back to parents really considering and coaching that child based on their values and beliefs, how they want that child to respond. And similar to the advice we gave earlier, kind of walking through role playing, talking that through with your child. You are going to be wearing a mask. Not everyone is going to be wearing.
Jenny a little bit here. She may be joining us back in a second.
Oh, am I back, Dustin?
Oh.
Can you see me?
We can see you and hear you now. We lost you for a second there.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No worries.
The weather here. So I was going back to, I'll back up a little bit just because I'm not sure where I cut out, but your response is really going to be based on, I think, kind of your family's values and beliefs. And I would really recommend coaching your kiddo and talking to your kiddo about what that response to bullying may look like before they hit the door. And so talking about, you're going to be wearing a mask. Not everyone's going to be wearing a mask. This is why we're choosing to have you wear a mask, because, and this is where that, family belief is, we feel important that this is going to keep you safe, or, we don't want you, again, age appropriate language. We don't want you to get any germs. It's really going to be family dependent. And so practicing that with the kiddo. And then if another child were to say something to your kid, practice with your child how you want them to respond Do you not want them to respond at all? So just, that's none of your business, walk away. Do you want them to have something to say? And what would that be? And that's, again, going to go back to those families, values, and beliefs. What you want them to say and how you want them to respond. Could you use humor? Is it more factual? I think some of this depends on your kid, your family's values and beliefs. Or there's also getting a teacher involved. If a kiddo is getting bullied, someone says something to them, that the direction is that they should go and tell a teacher or another trusted adult to help them manage that. So those were kind of the pieces. I hope most of that came through. Morgan, was there anything I forgot there?
I think everything that you had said, I completely agree with. I think it truly comes back to kind of deciding as a household unit, as a family, what feels best for you, kind of echoing off of what are your values, what are your beliefs, and then kind of going through there, like what would be the best response your child should have. And if those are not finding solutions, if they're not kind of resolving the problem, then taking the next step and approaching the school team to make sure that they can follow through with that school-based bullying procedure and supporting your child further.
Great. And I mean, I certainly imagine that just having that conversation with your child, if you feel like they may be put in that situation, if you are having them wear a mask and their school isn't requiring it, just having this conversation may help abet some of their feelings and fears and uncomfortableness by acknowledging that situation that they're going to be in, kind of a thing. So the one question that we had come through that I'd like to ask, and as a reminder, if you're watching this after it's broadcast live, please still leave your questions in the comments and we'll make sure they get answered. Was more of a general one for kids of any age, but do either of you have any thoughts and tips on some simple high-level ways that a parent can help their child build self-confidence?
Morgan, you want to take it?
Sure, I will jump right in. I think kind of coming back to the broad spectrum, we really want to think and take into consideration first our child's age and doing like age appropriate language. With building children's confidence, I think it really starts within the home, right? And continuing to support and recognize and praise your child's strengths, their qualities, encourage them to try new things and use those strengths within their school, the community. And part of that too is getting them involved in the community. I think extracurricular activities are fabulous for supporting children in building their confidence and their overall developing a healthy sense of self as they're connected to other trusted adults in the community, role models, and can really try out some of those skills and see what works for them and what doesn't as they're developing their identity and who they are. Additionally, I think there's so many wonderful resources too out there. I'm a big fan of books and reading. And if you can sit with your child and read with them about somebody who's inspirational, a role model, just a character in a TV show, movie, book, that can be a great conversation starter to have to kind of see how your child picks up on the strengths that individual has and what they admire about that individual and how to maybe build those into their own character or how they use them themselves. So really starting with those conversations at home with play, reading, praise, those are great ways to start building that healthy sense of self.
I think those are great suggestions. And I would add to, that was where I was kind of thinking was going with trying to see, and, even very young children can do this, what are their strengths? What are they good at? And seeing, again, level set, where are they at? What do they perceive as their strengths? And then how can you build off of that and help bolster, praise, foster those strengths so that they really feel confident walking into school and just in life. But I think too, really having that activity and making it purposeful. I think many parents would say, I praise my kid all the time. I tell them they're doing a good job. But really sitting down and doing this purposeful activity of, what are you really good at? What are your strengths? And then when you do praise your child, try to be specific in the praise that you give them. So not just good job, great work, But hey, I really love how you were such a great helper today. You did such a good job with helping mom unload the groceries from the car. Thank you so much for doing that. And so your child now knows, I did that specific thing really well. Hopefully it will build confidence and they'll be more likely to help you unload those groceries next time.
Awesome. So before we wrap up, I wanted to give you both an opportunity to say some closing words to our audience. Jenny, let's start with you.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, I'm really all about I'm all about kids, but I'm also all about our parents and bolstering our parents during this tough time. So parents, give yourself some grace. This is a transition for you as well as your child. For parents that may be working or even, those that stayed home, this is a shift in your routine, in your schedule. And so give yourself some grace and be kind to yourself. Find some time for some self-care. Remember, self-care does not need to be elaborate, expensive, or time-consuming. This could be finding time to take a hot shower, do something you enjoy for yourself, drinking a cup of coffee while it's still hot. It could be really minor things that make you feel good, and making sure that you just take the time out to do that for yourselves. And then to really work this year, let's keep those lines of communication open between you and your child. Checking in regularly, having that conversation about feelings, so that if there is a concern that pops up, you have that line of communication already open, and it's not going to be atypical for you to then go in and have a conversation about, hey, I noticed this is going on. Let's talk about that some more.
Yeah, and I completely agree with Jenny. Just truly be patient and kind to yourself as well as to your children. We're all learning and doing the best that we can. We're all experiencing new significant transitions in our life throughout this pandemic. So take moments in your day to pause, practice gratitude, or spend those extra moments engaged in an enjoyable activity with your family.
Great. Thank you both so much. So as we say goodbye today, I want to thank our panelists, Dr. Walzack and Morgan, for joining me in this conversation. Thank you to you, our audience. As a reminder, leave your questions in the comments, and even though we're not live anymore, we will answer them. At Children's Wisconsin, we believe caring for a child's mental and behavioral health is just as important as caring for their physical health. We're inviting you to help us shine through and light a path forward to better mental and behavioral health for kids in our state. You can learn more about Shine Through on our website, shinethrough.childrenswi.org. Thank you so much for watching.
We have a situation, Wisconsin. Our kids face a mental and behavioral health crisis. And it's time to shine through. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among teenagers. It's time to shine through and stop it in its tracks. There's a statewide shortage of pediatric mental and behavioral health workers. It's time to shine through and get families the help they need. These complex conditions, like anxiety and depression, can impact any child, anywhere. It's time to shine through and start a conversation that makes mental and behavioral health just as important as physical health. We are your kids, and this is our crisis. It's time to shine through and light a way forward. See how you can shine through and help create solutions for kids' mental and behavioral health with Children's Wisconsin.